Hi, I'm Bill Holkham, and thanks for joining me on another watercolor adventure. Today, we are off to the Pacific Northwest. Whether you're a beginner or looking to improve your landscape painting skills, this lesson will guide you through essential watercolor techniques. Grab your brushes, mix up your palette, and let's paint watercolors. Then, with a number 12 brush, we're putting water, clear water, over the whole of the sky area including the mountains. We will not be painting over the mountains at this stage. Um, there will be the white of the paper very close to the mountains area. Then we can use the light Windsor blue mixture, starting at the top of the painting. And as always, my board is at an angle. I have a block of wood at the top of my board, creating a little slope from top to bottom of only about 10-15 degrees. It doesn't need to be much. And also you'll notice on this occasion that the paper is taped down around all the edges because we're painting today with the 140-pound Arches rough paper as opposed to the 300-pound, which would not need to be taped down. I thought it would be useful for you to have a go at a painting using the thinner paper, and so that you could get used to both types. And of course, the thinner paper is less expensive, and therefore you may wish to use it for practicing various landscapes, etc. You will notice that I do have a tissue at hand, bit of kitchen roll, etc. So that I can take off any excess from the brush. And now I'm gently fusing in around the edges of the clouds to make them as realistic as possible and dispense with any hard edges. And then occasionally I'll just clean that brush off and just have clear water on and continue to do the softening of the edges. Then I'm adding some light red to that dark Windsor blue mixture at the bottom there, creating a grey colour, which is the colour of these mountains at North Cascades National Park in Washington State. And we're going to use a smaller brush. You can use something like a number 6 or 5, whatever we have. And do remember that these brush sizes do vary tremendously from one make to another, but you can see the size on the screen. And I'm laying down shapes for the mountain, and here and there we'll do some fusing at a later stage so that we create a nice tonal value where we transition between dark and light and so forth. So at the moment, it's just using the pure color. Then we dip into the water and we do that fusing that I mentioned. And then we start to get nice contrasts of lighter and darker and formation of shadow areas, etc. It's just a process of continuing in that fashion, switching from one to the other, darkening up here and there, and continuing to let the pigment fuse into certain areas that are still wet. And if you wish, as I've done here, you could also drop down to an even smaller brush, something like a number 2 with a nice point to it to allow you to achieve more accuracy. There is a little stretch of water just at the base of the mountain there. and then a larger area of water later on in the foreground. And we're mixing up some Windsor blue again and some Windsor yellow so that we can have some greens, and a darker version at the bottom with Scarlet Lake added. Once you add a red, you get more of an olive color, but of course you could change that further still by then adding more blue, etc. Then I'm using that small brush for these tree lines, very distant and therefore lightly indicated. And you've got the lighter version and the darker version, which you can use to vary and make sure that there is interest in variation for those distant trees. There will be lots of these, so we'll be showing a few of them rather than every single one, because otherwise the tutorial would be far too long. But at least you get the general idea as to how to build them up. The light areas in the mountain and distance there, snow-capped areas here and there, and so forth on the slopes. And that is negative painting that was used to create those, where we use the white of the paper for our whites in the English style of transparent watercolor. Then various gaps in between the tree lines gives us the opportunity of a nice contrast of light and dark with some of the yellow grasses and so forth. Those yellow grasses can be an underpainting, and we can add a little bit of green later here and there, but preserving some of that yellow feel. Also, there are nice yellow grass areas as we come down to the banks of this water area in the foreground. Then I'm mixing up a stronger version of green with very little water added. Just your three primary colors. You'll get used to mixing the correct proportions of those three primary colors to achieve different colors, different tones, and the value being the transition between lighter and darker, which you'll also get used to mixing. We're quite a long way through the painting, getting close to halfway, because as I mentioned, we won't be showing every single aspect where there is repetition. And so you will find later on that the screen will change to a more advanced level in the painting, with different areas having been completed in this same fashion. So here we are, we have jumped forward because, as I mentioned, lots of repetition going on here. And we've got the completed sort of distance middle ground area. Then we're having fun with some very tall trees. use a very small brush. You can, if you wish, indicate the trunks with either light pencil marks or just light amount of pigment run down to help you achieve the shapes that you're aiming for, make sure that they're perpendicular, etc. And you see, I'm using the scraping technique to create these trees. I want them to have variation. And because we're out in the wild, as opposed to a kept garden situation, the trees are battered and bashed and weather beaten, and therefore some branches will be longer than others, others broken off, etc., etc. So aim for variation. Here and there, you may wish to strengthen up the line of the trunks. You could use a mixture of light red with yellow and wings of blue, etc., create a brown. So we have completed those masses of tall trees on the left and the right hand side and the bank area, etc. There are lots of pebbles on the edge of the water there on the left hand side, which have been drawn in, and then we've put a greyish mixture over those to start with. And we need to put clear water over the whole of this area before we start adding colour. And because of reflections in the water, we are using a flat brush with downward strokes to indicate reflections in the water from all the greenery. So the water on this occasion has got a very light surface. I partly chose this location because of the variety involved, where we have the variety of the mountains, the valley, the, the different shades of green, the nice tall trees, and the rock formations, some of which have got nice color to them, etc. So there is a lot of interest. I don't want to lose this very light area closest to the bottom of the painting on the water, because we'll be showing some nice thin ripples in that area later. Then it's a case of building up the various shapes on the rocks, shadows and moss or lichen growing on the sides of the rocks and so forth, and a nice variation of colours and interest. And of course, the parts that are catching more light to them are lighter, and that adds more interest as well. Interest and realism. This left-hand side bank gives you the opportunity of dropping in some more greens and a variation in that area with interspersed with little rocky outcrops and so forth. And fusing that in with clear water and then here and there add in more pigment to build up a convincing bank. One that is quite varied and much more interesting. We're quite a way through this painting, about 3/4 of the way through now. Not too much to finish off. And do remember to like and subscribe. Then we'll notify you when new tutorials are uploaded. And we also welcome your comments and suggestions for new subjects that you'd like me to do tutorials for. And do remember that you can see us on YouTube, on Instagram, and on Facebook. I think you can learn a great deal from this particular tutorial of this picturesque and very interesting location. Quite a few techniques being used here, which will stand you in good stead when you tackle other subjects. You will very much be building up your repertoire of various transparent watercolor painting techniques. Lots of nice contrast taking place on this left-hand side of the bank with the stones coming down to the water, lighter and darker and so forth, making things much more interesting and realistic in that area. And as you can see, I do have tissue to hand, a kitchen roll, something like that, where you can just dab occasionally if you want to lighten something. Not much left to do now. We have this large rocky outcrop on the right hand side at the bottom of the painting. And then we'll be doing some various thin ripples on the water, but still preserving that light area. But it's very much catching the light colored clouds. So now with a very fine brush, something like a number 2, I'm laying in those little ripples with a grayish mixture. Just showing a little bit of breeze on the water, a little bit of movement. And you'll notice that the rocks do have a nice variation going on in them, lights and darks and a few different colors going on. Very close to the end of this painting now. Just finishing touches, and do know when to stop. Most important. You could go on, correcting this, adding to this, changing something. And it's important to know when to stop. We're close to that now. Here we are. Finished painting of the North Cascades National Park in Washington State. Hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Have a go at it, and I look forward to seeing you next time.